So what we're going to look at in this lesson is like solving quadratic equations. So if we have a look here, so these are the kind of three types of equations that you're going to come across in junior cert maths, higher level maths. So here we have like a linear equation. So what makes this a linear equation? Well, if you take the variable, okay, so the x variable, the highest power on a linear equation is x to the power of 1. Okay, so this is 3x, and when x is on its own like that, it's implied that that is x to the power of 1. Okay, so that when you have an equation that's like that, the highest power on the variable in the equation is to the power of 1, then it's what's called a linear equation. Then we have the quadratic equation. So again, with a quadratic equation, the highest power on the variable, on one of the variables that's in the equation, is x to the power of 2. So we can see that here in this one here. So again, you have x to the power of 2. When it's like that, it's called a quadratic equation. And then a cubic equation then has x, the highest power on the x variable, or it could be x or t or y or any, they could use any letter to represent the variable, is x to the power of 3. So that's what kind of distinguishes a linear equation from a quadratic equation from a cubic equation. So you have these three different types of equations. So what we're doing here, we are looking to solve the quadratic. So what that means is we're looking to solve for the value of x. So it's solving quadratics. So if we remember, if we take this guy here, so 3x plus 4 equals 1, and we want to solve for x. So basically what we're going to do is we would have to minus 4 from both sides. Okay, and then that's going to leave us with 3x is equal to minus 3, and then we divide both sides by minus 3. And they will cancel out. Sorry, actually we divide both sides by 3, should I say. So that will leave us with x is equal to 3 divided by minus 3, which is minus 1. So that's solving for x. So when we're solving, we're working out what the value of x actually is. Now with quadratics, it's slightly different. What we first need to do is we need to factorize the quadratic, and then we need to solve the quadratic. And we've been looking at factorizing quadratics, but I'm going to go through that now. So when you're asked to solve a quadratic, there's two ways that you can do it. There's one way, which is the way we're going to look at with this one, is what's called the trial and error method. And let me just write these up here. So you have the trial and error method. Okay, and we're going to do that, and we use that method for simple quadratics. And when we have simple quadratic, that means that the value for x when we solve it will be like a natural number or an integer. And also as well with simple quadratics, there's the x to the power of 2 term has 1 as the number that's in front of it. Okay, so it's a simple quadratic. If you have, let's say, a number in front of it like this, like 2, and sometimes the x value might be not be a natural number or an integer, it could be like a real number or a fraction, then that's a bit more complicated. So we have to use the formula B method. And I'm going to go through that as well in this lesson so you kind of know what it is. So let's have a look first of all at factorizing it. It'll be a bit of revision, and then how do we actually solve it once we've factorized it. So in order to factorize this, we basically open up our two brackets like so, and we look at the x to the power of 2 term, and we look at like what are the factors of x squared. So it's going to be x by x, and then you also have minus x by minus x. Okay, so again, remember those factors will go in here on the left hand side, so we can try them out. So it'll be x here and x here. So x by x gives me x squared. And then on the left hand side, we get the factors for 16. Okay, so we list out the factors for 16. So if we think about what they are, so you have 2 multiplied by 8. Okay, that's one factor up here. You have 3 multiplied by 6. And what else do you have? So let's say 16. So you have so you're going to have 4 by 4, and then you'll have 16. So for example, I'll just put this up here. So 16 multiplied by 1. Okay, so there's some of the factor pairs for this part here. So what you have to decide then is like which ones are the right ones, which are the correct factor pair. So you have to look at these numbers and think about if I add or subtract them together, I need to get this number in here. So when I add and subtract them, add or subtract them. So if I take 16 multiplied by 1, well, if I add or subtract 16 and 1, I get 17 or I get 15. So it's not going to be that one. Okay, so we can mark that one out. If I take, let's say, 3 and 6, if I add 3 and 6 together, it gives me 9. If I subtract 3 and 6 from each other, I'm going to get 3. So it doesn't give me 10 here, this number, so it's not going to be that number. And then if I take 4 by 4, if I add these together, I get 8. If I subtract them from each other, I get 0. So it's not going to be those. So that leaves us with 2 multiplied by 8. So if I add these together, it gives me this number here, 10. And then when I multiply them by each other, it gives me this number here, 16. So these are the correct ones. So again, what we do is we just put these numbers in here. So it's going to be plus 2 and plus 8. Sorry, no. So plus 8. Okay, so it looks something like that. So again, if I multiply these two out, I'll get this quadratic back again. So now what we do is we let these be equal to 0. So the whole quadratic is equal to 0, and then we let these factors, when multiplied by each other, be equal to 0. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to solve and find out the value for x. So in order to solve, what we do is we let both of these, each of the factor pairs, be equal to 0. So for example, I say x plus 2 is equal to 0, and then I say x plus 8 is equal to 0. And now what I can do is I can solve for x, so I can get x on its own. So I have the minus 2 here, and that will leave me with x is equal to minus 2. Okay, so that's the first value for x. And generally with quadratics, you will have the value for x, you'll have two values. So for this one here, so I have the minus 8 from here, minus 8 from here, and then x is going to be equal to minus 8. So there are two answers. So x is equal to minus 2, and x is equal to minus 8. And what that means is if I was to take either of these values and I was to substitute them into the expression here and solve them, basically the expression would be equal to 0. So if I take x to the power of 2, so if I substitute in 2, that's going to be minus 2 by minus 2, which gives me 4, plus 10 times minus 2, which is equal to which is going to be equal to minus 20, and then plus 16 plus 4 will give us plus 20, and then they'll cancel out and will give us 0. So these are what are known as, these are the roots. So the roots of the quadratic. Okay, so they're the roots of the quadratic. So let's try another one here. So let's look at this guy here, and let's solve. So we want to solve the quadratic. So solve it, and that means we want to work out what the value of x is. So again, we look at our quadratic. We take this first term here. So we open up two brackets. And again, on the left-hand side, you have the factors that give you x squared. So what are the factors for x squared? So we've x multiplied by x, and then we've minus x by minus x, like so. Okay. And then what we do is we look at 15, and we think about what are the factor pairs for 16. So you have 3 multiplied by 5. Okay. You have 1 multiplied by 15. Okay, and do we have any other ones? Okay, so they're the main factor pairs. And then also as well, you would have, let's say, minus 3 multiplied by minus 3, or sorry, minus 3 multiplied by minus 15, or 5 should I say. So these are what are called factor pairs. So it means that when I multiply them by each other, so both of these numbers will, so minus 3 multiplied by minus 5. Okay, so these are factor pairs, so it just means that if I was to take 15, minus 3 will divide into it evenly, and minus 5 will divide in evenly as well. And then when I multiply them by each other, it gives me 15. So that's what we mean by factor pairs. So now what we do is we have to figure out what we put in here. So on the left hand side, we put the terms that when multiplied by each other give us x squared. So we're just going to put in x and x. And then on this side, we want to put in the factors that when multiplied by each other will give us plus 15. But when we add them up or combine them, will give us, add or subtract them, they'll give us minus 8. So if we take, let's say, 1 and 15, so if I add or subtract these together, it won't give me minus 8, so therefore I can rule these ones out. Okay, now if I take 3 and 5, okay, when I multiply them by each other, it gives me plus 15, but if I add them together, I will get plus 8. Okay, so it's not going to be these guys. So if I take minus 3 and minus 5, when I multiply these together, it gives me plus 15. And then when I add them together, so minus 3 and minus 5, when I add those together, it'll give us minus 8. So this is going to be your factor pair. So again, we put these in here, so minus 3 and minus 5. Okay, so if I multiply these two factors out, they will give me back this original quadratic here. So again, now I want to solve for x. So what I do is, so first of all, I let the two of these multiplied by each other equal to 0. So if the two of these multiplied by each other is equal to 0, then each of them will be equal to 0. So you let each of them be equal to 0. So x minus 3 is equal to 0, and x minus 5 is equal to 0. So then what we can do is we can just solve for x. So in order to get x on its own, I have to add 3 here, add 3 here. So x is going to be equal to 3. And then here I have to add 5 here and add 5 here. So x is going to be equal to 5. So plus 5. So what we have then is we have, so the answers then are x is equal to 3 and x is equal to 5. So these are what are called quadratics, and we have our two values for x for each of these quadratics. So again, these are the roots of the quadratic. So if I was to take either of these values and substitute them into the original expression, they will evaluate this expression to 0. Okay, so that's the trial and error method. So let's have a look at the next method, which is using a formula, and this is where we're dealing with like quadratics that are hard to factorize using this method. So either the number in front of the x to the power 2 term is like, let's say, greater than 1, or the value for x is not like a whole number. So that makes it impossible to try and solve it using this trial and error method. So what you do is you use the formula B, which is in your log tables. So if you have a look on your log tables, so this here is your formula B. It's actually on the front. You don't even need to open your log tables. It's contained here on the front. So this is the formula that we want to use. X is equal to minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. So that's the formula that we're going to use now to solve or factorize a quadratic, or to, should I say, find the roots or solve a quadratic. So this here is the formula. So this is what it looks like. So x is equal to minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times ac, all divided by 2 times a. So if we have a look at these, so first of all we have the a term. Okay, so this is the a term here. So we have a shown up here and a shown up here. So if we take our quadratic, so this is our quadratic here. So the number a is equal to this here. Okay, so it's the number that's in front of the term that has x to the power of 2. Okay, so that's your a value. Then if we take so the next one is your b value. Okay, so you have b here and you have b here. So what we do is the b value then is this value here that's in front of the term that has just 8x. Okay, so this is your b value. Okay, so that's your b. And then the last one then is your c value. Let's just change this to orange. So this is your c value here. And again, we're c in the quadratic, so this is your c here. So that's the first thing you want to do is identify, for example, a, b, and c. So if we take these, so the value a is equal to, in this case, 2. The value b is equal to this value here, which is minus 8. And the value c is equal to this value here, which is minus 24. Okay, so that's how you know. So how do I know to use this formula? Well, if I have a quadratic that the x squared value has a number in front of it that's greater than 1, then I use this quadratic here to solve it. And also as well, it's used for where the x value is like a decimal place or a fraction. Okay, so it's very hard to use the other method that we use, trial and error, so we use this guy here. And remember, this formula is in your log table, so you don't need to memorize it, but you do need to know how to use it. So once we have, so we write out our formula, we identify A, B, and C, the parts that go into the formula, we identify them on our quadratic, we can just write them out like that. Then the next step is to take these values and substitute them into the formula. Okay, so that just means wherever there's a b, we're going to put in the value for b. Wherever there's a c, we put in the value for c. Wherever there's an a, we put in the value for a. So let's have a look and see what will that look like. So it's going to be x is equal to, so minus b, so we put in the value for minus b. So it's going to be minus, okay, and then put in the value for minus b, which is minus 8. So you put it in like that. Okay, so make sure you have the brackets in like so, plus or minus, okay, the square root of b to be squared. Okay, so the value for b is minus 8, so it's going to be minus 8 bracket squared minus 4 times bracket the value for a, which is 2, bracket the value for c, which is minus 24, so minus 24. So just be careful, make sure and put in each of the values in brackets like so, and put in, if it's a negative value, make sure and put it in. And then that's all going to be over 2 times the value for a, which is 2, okay, like so. So if you just do this, okay, you'll get the majority of your marks in your exam. Being able to look at the formula, identify the parts from the quadratic that go into the formula, and then substitute the value into the formula. Now the next part then is what you want to start to do is you want to start simplifying this. Okay, so basically working it down and simplifying it. Okay, so if we have a look at the first part, so x, so let's simplify it. So it's going to be x is equal to, so this is going to be minus 1 times minus 8, so that'll just become positive 8, plus or minus the square root of, so, and we can use our calculator here, so minus 8 to be squared, so that's just going to be 8 multiplied by 8, which gives us 64. Okay, so that's going to become 64. So then we have minus, let me just get rid of this. So we have minus 4 multiplied by 2 multiplied by minus 24. Okay, what will that give us? That'll give us 109, so plus 198. So that's going to be positive plus 198. So plus, sorry, 192 should I say? 192. Okay, all over 2 by 2, which is 4. Okay, so it looks something like that. And then we can simplify that some more. So it's going to be x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of, so 64 plus so 64 plus 192, so plus 64, that will give me 256, that's the square root of 256. Okay, and then that's going to be x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 156. So if I get the square root of, 256, that's going to give me 16. So it's going to be, just get rid of this guy here. So it's going to be plus or minus 16. Plus or minus 16 over 4. Okay, so it looks something like that. That would be also over 4 here. Okay, so now once we kind of get down to this point, so we have something here like this. So now we're going to have two answers. We're going to have a positive answer. Okay, so we're going to have the plus version, and then we're going to have the minus version. Okay, so see the way inside here you have these plus or minuses here. Okay, so that means you're going to have two values. You're going to have x 8 plus 16 divided by 4, and then you're going to have x 8 minus 16 divided by 4. So you're going to have these two answers. So if we take the first one, so x is equal to 8 plus 16 divided by 4. Okay, so that's going to be equal to 8 and 16 is 24 divided by 4, which is equal to 24 divided by 4 is equal to 6. Okay, so x is equal to 6. So x is equal to 6 is one of your answers. And then if we take this second one then, so we have x is equal to 8 minus 16 divided by 4. And that's going to be equal to, so 8 minus 16 is minus 8 divided by 4, which is going to be equal to minus 2. Okay, so therefore x is equal to minus 2. So these are your two values, or your two answers. So x is equal to 6 and x is equal to minus 2. So again, that is solving a quadratic using the quadratic formula that's contained inside the log tables. And again, you use this when you have, if you need to solve a quadratic that has an x squared value that's greater than 1, okay, because you won't be able to use the other method, the trial and error method. And remember, you don't need to memorize this, it's contained in your logbooks. So that is the two ways that you can solve quadratic equations.